Let me ask you something that's going to sound dark, but stick with me. You've seen the movies. The Walking Dead has Carl surviving for years. World War Z shows kids making it through hordes of zombies. Even A Quiet Place has children outsmarting monsters. Hollywood loves showing us that kids can survive the apocalypse, but here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to talk about. They can't, at least, not the way movies show us. And before you click away thinking this is just me being pessimistic, I need you to understand something. This isn't about being mean to kids. This is about looking at the cold, hard reality of what a zombie outbreak would actually be like, and why almost everything you've seen on screen is a beautiful lie designed to make you feel better. Because when you strip away the Hollywood magic and look at the actual science, the actual biology, the actual psychology of survival, kids are at a massive disadvantage. And today, we're going to talk about why, and more importantly, what can actually be done about it. Before we dive in, if you're into deep, thought-provoking zombie survival and science content like this, hit that subscribe button, because this one is going to make you rethink everything you thought you knew about zombie fiction. So let's start with the most obvious problem that every zombie movie conveniently ignores: size and strength. In The Walking Dead, Carl Grimes is taking down walkers with headshots at age 12. In World War Z, kids are running through zombie-infested streets and making it out alive. Looks great on screen, right? But here's what those movies don't show you. The average zombie, even a slow-moving Walking Dead-style walker, is still a full-grown adult with adult strength. Now, they might be decaying and slower, but their muscle mass is still there, at least in the early stages. A 12-year-old kid weighs maybe 90 pounds soaking wet. An adult zombie weighs 150 to 200 pounds. That's basic physics. When a zombie grabs a child, that child doesn't have the strength to break free. An adult might be able to shove a walker off, create distance, and fight back, but a kid, they're getting overpowered in seconds. And let's talk about weapons for a second, because this is where movies really lie to us. You know that crossbow Daryl uses in The Walking Dead? That thing has a draw weight of like 150 pounds. You need serious upper body strength just to load it, let alone aim and fire accurately. Most kids under 14 couldn't even pull the string back. Guns? Sure, a kid can pull a trigger, but have you ever fired a gun? The recoil on even a small handgun can knock an untrained adult off balance. Now imagine a 70-pound kid trying to handle that recoil while aiming at a moving target, probably while terrified they'd miss, and that gunshot just told every zombie in a half-mile radius exactly where they are. But here's where it gets really interesting. Let's say we're not talking about weapons. Let's talk about basic survival tasks that adults take for granted. A zombie apocalypse isn't just about fighting zombies. It's about finding food, purifying water, creating shelter, navigating without GPS, making fire, treating injuries, and doing all of this while staying quiet and hidden. These are skills that most adults don't even have. Now, ask a 10-year-old to do them. Can a 10-year-old start a fire without matches? Can they identify which wild plants are safe to eat? Can they treat a wound without antibiotics? Can they navigate using the sun and stars? The answer for most kids is no, because why would they know how to do any of that? They've grown up in a world with microwaves and Google Maps and Band-Aids, and here's the really harsh part. Even if you try to teach a kid these skills during an apocalypse, they're learning under the worst possible conditions. They're scared, they're hungry, they're traumatized, and their brain is in survival mode, which actually makes it harder to learn and retain new information. Now, movies love to show us that kids are smaller and can hide easier. That's true. But you know what else is true? Kids are loud. I don't mean they talk loud, though that's also a problem. I mean their very existence is loud. Kids cry when they're scared, they whimper when they're hurt, they have nightmares and wake up screaming. In 28 Days Later, the infected are attracted to sound and movement. In The Walking Dead, walkers swarm to noise. In World War Z, zombies go absolutely berserk at the slightest sound. Now imagine trying to keep a 7-year-old completely silent for days or weeks at a time while they're terrified and don't fully understand why they have to be quiet. It's not happening. And let's talk about something even darker that no zombie movie wants to address: the psychological impact. Adults can barely handle the trauma of watching society collapse, watching people they love die, living in constant fear. Post-traumatic stress disorder would be universal in a zombie apocalypse. Now put that on a child whose brain isn't even fully developed yet, who doesn't have the emotional tools to process extreme trauma, who needs stability and safety to develop properly. Kids in an apocalypse wouldn't just be fighting zombies. They'd be fighting their own minds, dealing with anxiety, depression, and psychological breakdown that would make them even more vulnerable. But here's where it gets really interesting and where I need to introduce a concept that changes everything. See, I've spent the last few minutes telling you why kids can't survive, and all of that is true if we're comparing kids to adults. But what if we stop comparing them to adults and start looking at what kids actually are? Adaptable learners with different advantages than adults have. Because here's what movies actually get right occasionally, even if they exaggerate it. Kids are smaller, which means they need less food and water to survive. That's not nothing when resources are scarce. Kids can fit into spaces adults can't, which means more hiding spots and escape routes. And most importantly, kids' brains are still developing, which yes, makes them more vulnerable to trauma, but also makes them more adaptable to new realities. An adult brain is set in its ways. A kid's brain is still learning how the world works. In a zombie apocalypse, the world has new rules, and kids might actually adapt to those rules faster than adults who keep trying to apply old world logic to a new world situation. So the real question isn't whether kids can survive exactly like adults do. They can't. The question is, can kids survive if they play to their actual strengths and compensate for their weaknesses? And the answer to that is maybe, if they do very specific things. Let me give you a realistic survival guide for kids in a zombie apocalypse, and I'm going to be brutally honest about what works and what doesn't. First rule, and this is non-negotiable: kids cannot survive alone. I don't care how smart or tough or resourceful a kid is. A child under 16 trying to survive solo in a zombie apocalypse is dead within weeks. They need adults, or at the very least, they need a group of older teenagers who can handle the physical demands of survival. This isn't me being mean. This is biology and physics. So step one for any kid: find adults you can trust, or find a group. Don't go it alone, ever. Movies love the lone survivor kid trope, but it's a death sentence in reality. Now, once you're in a group, here's what kids can actually contribute. Kids should be lookouts. You're smaller, you can climb trees and hide in elevated positions better than adults. And your job isn't to fight, it's to see danger coming and alert the group. That's valuable. That's something you can do better than a full-grown adult who's too heavy to climb that tree. Kids should be foragers, but only in safe zones that have been cleared by adults. Your size means you can search through small spaces, under debris, in crawl spaces where supplies might be hidden. But, and this is critical, you never forage alone, and you never forage in an area that hasn't been secured. Your job is to be thorough in safe spaces, not to take risks in dangerous ones. Here's something no zombie movie ever shows: kids should be the water and fire tenders. These are essential survival tasks that don't require size or strength. Keeping a fire going, boiling water to purify it, rationing supplies, these are things kids can learn and do while staying in a secure location. It's not glamorous, but in a real apocalypse, the person who keeps the fire going and the water clean is just as important as the person who fights off zombies. Now let's talk about the hard skills kids need to learn immediately if they want to survive long-term. First, you need to learn to be quiet. Not just talking quiet, but moving quiet. Practice walking without making sound. Learn to control your breathing. Train yourself to cry silently if you need to cry, because in a world where sound means death, you don't get the luxury of loud emotions. This sounds harsh, but it's the truth. Second skill, learn to make fire without matches or lighters, because those will run out. Learn multiple methods. Friction fire with a bow drill, flint and steel, even using a battery and steel wool. Practice until you can do it quickly and efficiently, because fire isn't just for warmth, it's for purifying water, cooking food, and signaling for help. Third skill, basic first aid. Learn to clean and bandage wounds. Learn to recognize infection. Learn to splint a broken bone. In an apocalypse, a small cut can become a deadly infection if you don't know how to treat it properly. Medical supplies will be scarce, so you need to know how to improvise. Fourth skill, and this one is crucial, learn to identify edible plants in your region. Starvation kills faster than zombies in a long-term survival situation. You need to know what's safe to eat and what will poison you. Study this now. Practice identifying plants, learn what different seasons offer, because when grocery stores are empty, nature is your only food source. But here's where it gets really interesting, because we need to talk about what type of zombie you're actually dealing with, because your survival strategy changes dramatically based on the threat. If you're dealing with Walking Dead-style slow walkers, kids actually have a decent chance if they're smart. Slow zombies are a manageable threat. They're predictable. You can outrun them. You can avoid them by staying quiet and hidden. A kid in a group with adults, learning survival skills, staying in secure locations, can survive slow walkers for years. Potentially, the real threats become starvation, disease, and other human survivors, not the zombies themselves. But if you're dealing with 28 days later, rage-infected, kids are in serious trouble. These aren't slow zombies. These are fast, aggressive, and they swarm. A child cannot outrun a rage-infected. They can't fight one off. Their only hope is to hide or be protected by adults. In this scenario, kids become a major liability to any group because they slow everyone down and attract danger. World War Z fast zombies are even worse. These zombies can form human pyramids, they react to sound instantly, and they're everywhere. In this scenario, honestly, survival rates for everyone drop dramatically, but kids especially have almost no chance without significant adult protection. Now here's the really uncomfortable question nobody wants to ask. Should adults even try to keep kids alive in a zombie apocalypse? And I know that sounds horrible, but let me explain why it's a legitimate strategic question. Kids require more resources than they provide. They need protection, food, water, emotional support, and they can't contribute as much to group survival as adults can. In a world of scarce resources, every mouth to feed is a calculation. Groups that prioritize children might have higher mortality rates overall because they're expending resources on people who can't fully contribute yet. But here's where I'm going to push back on that cold logic, because humans aren't just survival machines. We're social creatures who build civilizations. And civilizations need children, not just for reproduction, but because children represent hope and future. A group that abandons its children might survive longer in the short term, but they've lost their humanity and their reason for rebuilding. So yes, kids make survival harder, but they also make survival meaningful. So let's bring this full circle. Why don't kids survive in a realistic zombie apocalypse? Because they're smaller, weaker, less skilled, more emotional, and more vulnerable than adults. Hollywood lies to you by showing competent child survivors because it makes for better storytelling, and we want to believe kids can make it. But here's the twist. Kids can survive, just not the way movies show. They survive by being smart enough to know their limitations, by attaching themselves to competent adults, by learning essential skills quickly, by playing to their actual advantages like size and adaptability, and by contributing to group survival in ways that don't require them to be mini adults. A kid who tries to be Carl Grimes is a dead kid. A kid who accepts their role as a learner, a lookout, and a support member of a larger group has a fighting chance. And here's the final piece of the puzzle. The best time to prepare kids for survival isn't during the apocalypse, it's now. Teaching kids basic survival skills, emotional regulation, critical thinking, and adaptability isn't just apocalypse prep. It's life prep. Kids who know how to think critically, stay calm under pressure, work in groups, and solve problems will do better in any crisis, zombie apocalypse or otherwise. So, could kids survive a zombie apocalypse? Alone? No. As mini adults, fighting zombies? No. But as adaptable members of a survival group who know their strengths and limitations and have been taught essential skills? Maybe. It's not a guarantee, and it's definitely not easy, but it's possible. And honestly, if we ever do face a real zombie-like pandemic, which as we discussed before, isn't as impossible as it sounds, the kids who make it won't be the Hollywood heroes. They'll be the quiet ones who learn to listen, to learn, to adapt, and to survive, not by being the strongest, but by being the smartest about their own limitations. That's the truth Hollywood won't tell you, but it's the truth that might actually save lives.